Hi, Bill here again. Now we're going to try to manipulate line drawings in Photoshop. So the first step is to open one of your scans. And the first thing you notice about it is it doesn't seem to be as white as the paper was. And yeah, that's the way scanners work. And you usually have to adjust brightness, contrast. And there are several ways to do that. We're going to take probably the simplest and least sophisticated, but for those of you who are beginners, this will be an easy way to do it. If you are very familiar with Photoshop and you have another way you want to work, that's fine too. But before we adjust, we're going to take a couple of small steps. We want to make a duplicate layer. Now, why is that? The idea is if we do something that really messes up, it'd be great to have the original scan so we don't have to go back and scan over again. So if we go to Layers up here at the top of the screen, we see the second choice down is Duplicate Layer, and it says Background Copy. We say OK. And now if you look over to the right here, this is part of the essence of working in Photoshop. You've now got two layers. And before you're done, you may have 20, 60, well, you may just have 3 or 4 in this project, but that's the lifeblood of the system. It makes it work so well, having the layers to work with. The other thing we want to do before we adjust brightness and contrast is to get a little closer to our line work. I'm using the magnifying glass zoom tool, and we can actually see the quality of the lines, which is good before we start adjusting. And then we go to Image, Adjustments, Brightness, Contrast, and make sure these two boxes are ticked. Preview so that you can see what's happening as you adjust, and use Legacy. That just means to make it work the way it used to, which is what we want in this case. So I'm going to adjust brightness, and you're going to see the back. Whoa, look at that white come out. Now, look, if you push brightness too far, you start losing your line work. So we want to limit that to about 20 probably, or even a little below that. And then the contrast will help make the whites whiter and the blacks blacker. That's what contrast means. Again, you don't want to go too far with that because, look, it starts to distort the line work quite a bit. I wouldn't go much above 30 on that. I'll go 31. Say OK. Now, at this point, you've got darker line work and whiter whites, but especially if you've been working in pencil, you might want your line work to be a little more robust, a little darker. And one way to do that is to create another duplicate layer, and that's copy 2. And you can now see we have 3 layers in a pile. It doesn't really mean anything because they're all the same. But we're going to do something different right now. At the top here of your layers on the right, it says Normal in a little box. If you click on that box and move down to Multiply, do you see what happened? The line work got much more robust. And you might be wondering why and how. What's happened is by putting copy 2 in Multiply, we've made the white disappear, so it's layer 2 is almost as though the drawing was done on a piece of glass or acetate. And to show you that, I'm just going to move it around a little. You see, we actually have, this is copy 2 moving around, and we can see through the white parts, and it doubled up to make the dark parts. Now, just so I make sure I get it back in the right place, I'm going to go up here to Edit and undo the move, and it goes popping right back. Because we want to work with it as a whole and not in separate layers, we're going to now merge that layer down. Merge those 2 layers together. And the way you do that, you go to Layer, and the drop-down menu way down at the bottom is Merge Down. So now we've merged that, and we have a single layer that's darker and has more contrast and has whiter whites than the first layer. And I'll just turn it off, and you can compare. You see? That was our original scan, and this is what we have now. Okay? So you can turn layers off and on here with these little eyes next to them. Now, the next thing on our agenda, by using Alt, I can back out of the zoom, is going to be to make a sheet to work on. And the way to do that, go up to File, New, not Duplicate File, New File, and under Presets, we have a choice. US or International Paper. We're going to choose International. And the default settings should be A4 size, 300 DPI, and RGB color. And that's fine because that's exactly what our scan was set for. And if you prefer to work in landscape, go to Image, Image Rotation, and rotate 90 degrees. If you're using a newer version of Photoshop, creating a new file will be different. As with the older version, begin by clicking File and New. You'll see a dialog set up with various choices and tabs across the top of them. We want to work on a new A4 sheet, or letter size, if you're printing on American paper. If the size you want is showing, click on it. If not, go to the Print tab, and A4 and letter will be there. Once you click on it, details will appear. These should be just what we want. 300 DPI, RGB color, and white background. If these settings are different, change them to 300, RGB, and white. You now have a choice of portrait or landscape orientation for your new file. Choose the one you prefer and click Create. And there you have your new file. Even though there's nothing on your new file yet, it might be a good time to save it, since once you start working you might forget about saving. Click File, Save As, make sure you're saving as a Photoshop doc, and choose a place to save it or create a new one that makes sense. Name your file and click Save. Now back to creating a new image from your scans for all versions of Photoshop. Here's the two files next to each other. This is how you would go from one to the other in the current system, but I'm kind of from the old school. I like to be able to see them both at once, and you can achieve that by going to Window and Arrange, and if you put Float All in Windows, now we've got the two sheets where we can see them side by side, because we're going to select, what we're going to try and do is cut out some of these elements one by one and move them over here or paste them on our new sheet. For the first one, I'm going to use the Polygon Lasso tools. Now you see if you click and press over here in the toolbar, you get several choices, okay? And we'll look at the Lasso tool or the Magnetic Lasso tool another time. But the Polygon Lasso tool, it's easy not to run into problems with that one, because every time you click it, it's like a mechanical lasso actually. Every time you click it, it has a stopping point. So yeah. And if you click it twice at the end, it connects with itself. So now we have our toothpaste. And I'm going to take the Move tool. It's the Move tool over here. And I'm going to move the toothpaste to the new sheet. There it is. Now I'm going to go back and use the Polygon Lasso again. I'm going to grab another element. I'm going to go for the toothbrush this time. Little tricky in here. I might get a little piece of that aspirin box. And instead of using the Move tool this time, just to show you, you can also go Edit, Copy, and then go to the new file, Edit, Paste. So now we have two items on the sheet. And one thing I want to show you over here in the layers is you can rearrange the layers. So the toothbrush is on top, but if we pull down the toothbrush, now the toothpaste is on top. And also, there's another thing over here in the layers. You can name these. So if you want to call this one a toothbrush, so you won't get lost, you can. And obviously you could call this one toothpaste. Now, just to see more clearly what's going on, I'm going to turn off the background layer. This little checkerboard represents nothingness in Photoshop. So we can see these areas of white that accompanied our line drawings, because that's how we cut them around the edge. And let's just say that we didn't want this white area. We wanted to be able to see more of the toothbrush. So how do we go about selecting and eliminating that? I'm going to move in a little closer so you can see that. All right, I just clicked, without thinking, on the Magic Wand tool. Now, if your Quick Selection tool is showing, again, you just hold it down until the Magic Wand tool appears, and you click on that. Then you've got the Magic Wand. What the Magic Wand does is it selects like pixels that are like each other. So in this case, we have lots of white pixels, and we're going to select them. And once you've selected them, you just hit Delete or Backspace, and boom, they are gone. So that's pretty handy. I just deselected by double-clicking, which is another little trick. So now we have our toothpaste cut out and our toothbrush still with the white area around it. But let's suppose that you wanted your toothbrush on top. So I'll move the toothbrush up to the top here if you look at the layers again. And it was causing the same kind of problem, and you wanted to delete that outer white area. I've got to get on the toothbrush layer, and then I'm going to use the Magic Wand to try and do that. But this time, look what happens when we delete. We've lost all the white. Now, why is that? It can be quite maddening. You just did the same thing that you did on the toothpaste, but the toothbrush didn't work. So I'm going to head up here to Edit, and Undo Clear, and then I'm going to deselect, And then we're going to go in for a closer look. I've worked with this toothbrush before, and it took me a while to figure out what was going on with it. But do you see this little slot here? It connects these white pixels with those white pixels. So if we use the magic wand and we click out here, it's going to select all the white both inside and outside. So the toothpaste did not have any little canals around the edge. And this is the reason I initially suggested that at least some of your drawings have complete lines around the edges. So in a case like this, we can use this pencil tool, which might look like the brush tool before you click on it, pencil tool, and you could close that little gap. And now, when we use the magic wand, we see that it doesn't intrude to the interior, and now we've eliminated that white area around it. By the way, the magic wand has a tolerance, so it might be that if that tolerance were set higher, it would bust through some of these gray lines. You can adjust that, particularly if you're working in pencil and not pen. Okay, I'm going to back out. Let's go back to our original scan and select something else. The loo roll, we'll keep away from that kind of bathroom humor. We'll take this razor instead, and this time I'm going to drag it. But here's a little trick for dragging things. If you're using a lot of the tools and you hold down Command, you get to change the tool to the Move tool. So now I just changed that to the Move tool and dragged it. Now this time, I'm not sure taking the white around from the edge would really work because it's kind of a drawing that's not that complete. But if you remember, when we were making our line work heavier with duplication and multiply mode, we're going to try that again. We're going to put on multiply. And look at that. You can see right through it, which is great. And I'm just going to move it around there a little bit so you can see that. Now, normally if the background were on, the white just disappears. So basically, yeah, you can use this for transparency. And there are other things you could do too. For instance, now, some of the things we've already done. Suppose we made a duplicate layer and we didn't want it darker. We could have two razors. And of course, that looks a little phony because we're using the same one twice. But now I'm going to show you Command T, which allows you to make something larger or smaller. It also allows you to twirl things around. Yeah, and if you hit right click, you can flip them horizontally, vertically. So this is sort of like a little acrobatic tool. I'm going to make it even a little smaller. And if you hold down the Shift key, you can squeeze or stretch your shape. And the Command key lets you distort it this way. You're done with using Command T, you hit Return, Enter. Now, in this case, you might think, well, the line work's a little light on that one compared to the others. So once again, you could use the old duplicate layer trick. And since it's already in multiply, look at that, brought it right out. And now we could merge down. And we're starting to build a bit of a composition here. So those are the kind of effects that you can manage with these very few methods that we've looked at so far. And I hope you have fun playing around with your own.